Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, sponsor. I'm going to drastically narrow the scope of what I'm going to talk about today, given the time restraints. Um, I do have a presentation on COVID-19 scams, and there are so many. Crooks have taken full advantage of the fact that we're in a pandemic and we're in very uncertain times. But given the audience, I'm going to try and focus on scams affecting real property and real estate. And I'll be quite honest with you, some of these we are not able to prosecute in our office because these scams originate from out of the country. We're talking about fraudsters who live in Nigeria, who live in Hong Kong, who live in China, who live in India. It's impossible for us to go after these crooks, which is why it's so important when you are victimized by a scam or know of a scam that you report to the FBI, and I can tell you how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the business email compromise scams, known as the BEC scams. So I'm sure most of you know what these scams are, because if you work in real estate, hopefully your companies have safeguards in place so you're not victimized by these scams. The first I heard of these scams was a couple of years ago when I knew about a young couple who had lost their down payment on their house because I think it was the escrow company had gotten an email changing where the money was to be sent at closing, and it was sent to a scammer. So there was no way to trace the money. The money was gone, and this poor young couple lost their dream of home ownership. So this is the typical scenario. A person who performs some kind of monetary transfer gets an email requesting that the money be sent to a different location or by a different payment method. And even though I'm sure you are all aware of this scam, and hopefully, as I said, your companies have safeguards in place to protect you from this scam, the FBI has made it clear to us that this scam is becoming much more prevalent and much worse and much more sophisticated. In 2019, $1.7 billion was lost through this scam in the United States. And lots of businesses, not just real estate companies, but lots of businesses are being targeted, including municipalities. The latest is scammers finding out that municipalities are purchasing personal protective equipment. And so they are sending bills by email, supposedly to pay for this equipment, which of course then never comes. So there's three ways that this scam works: by spoofing, by spear phishing, and by installing malware. Now, installing malware is usually the way that these scammers get into your company computer, your company email. And they usually do that by tricking you or one of your employees to click on a link. And by clicking on the link, the malware gets installed. They now have access to your email threads, your billing, your invoices, your passwords, lots of things that they can use to then scam your company out of money. So spoofing is when they use an email that looks very similar to somebody's email in your company. Let's say that I'm the CEO of a company. I'm the one that usually gives directions about where money should be sent at the close of a transaction. Let's say my email is vickyjohnson@gmail.com. You might get an email that's vicky.johnson@gmail.com. Now, you're going to glance at it. It's going to look like my email. You're not going to see that one little addition, or they might spell my name differently, Vickie. You're not going to notice that normally. You're going to think it's coming from me. I'm the CEO of the company. I'm telling you to change the destination of a particular transaction. Now, you can create something called an intrusion detection system to flag these slight email changes, and I know that some companies have put this in place. Spear phishing is another very sophisticated technique that these scammers are now using. They will target a particular company and particular employees within that company, like the CEO, like the CFO. They will actually do research on that company. They will look at your website, where are you located? They'll try and get a phone list of your employees. They'll try and trick somebody in the company from giving them the name of the CEO, the name of the CFO. They'll go online, they'll use social media, they'll find out everything that they can about you. They will install malware, they will target email messages and data on what you do in your personal life, your hobbies, maybe photographs of you, and they'll target your boss. What do his messages look like? Are they casual? Are they formal? Does he use your first name when he is sending you an email message? And that's the way that they can trick you into making a transaction that is not authorized, but is going somewhere other than where it's supposed to go. So the crooks will monitor, once they've gotten into your email, once they've gotten into your company, they will monitor emails that are involved in one of your real estate transactions. And right about when the transaction is ready to culminate, they will send an instruction, let's say to the escrow officer, at just the right time. And they might say, hey, instead of sending a check, we want you to do this by wire transfer, and here's the address of the bank. So I was recently involved in a real estate transaction where I was the buyer. And we went into the escrow office to sign documents. And at the very end, the escrow officer said to me, how would you like the money sent to you? I said, oh, he said, we can wire it into your bank account. We can send it by check. I said, oh, we'll send it by check. Not trusting wire transfers because I do this, this business. And so he said, okay, but if at the last minute you change your mind and you want me to send it by wire transfer, just shoot me an email. And I thought to myself, bingo. Anybody following our email stream, our email communication would take advantage of that particular opportunity. So this happened in Santa Barbara. And by the way, I have a fraud hotline, which means that I get lots and lots of calls coming in telling me about different frauds and scams that are operating in Santa Barbara County. And in fact, the Sheriff's Department often sends these people to me because truthfully, there's nothing that they can do if these scammers are operating out of our jurisdiction. So I do get these phone calls. One came in from an accountant from a nonprofit. She was the one that was in charge of mailing out the checks. She got an email from somebody that she thought was the CEO of her company. She knew that that person was out of town. And the CEO contacted her, said, we need to pay this bill right away. Please send the money to this particular account. The accountant did. And of course, it was a scam. So the fraudster took full advantage of knowing who the CEO was, knowing that that person was out of town, and knowing what their email looked like. So where does the money go? It usually goes to a money mule, somebody who works here in the United States who sets up bank accounts to collect this kind of money. They then quickly get the money, withdraw the money, close the account, and transfer the money to crooks overseas. A lot of it goes to, a lot of these frauds are run by a group called the Scattered Canary operating out of Nigeria. So to protect yourself from this kind of fraud, limit what you share about yourself, about your employees, about your company. Be very wary if somebody is urging you to act quickly. Question that. If the sender's tone doesn't sound right, if the email is poorly worded, grammatically incorrect, big red flags, whatever you do, don't click on unknown links. Be wary of somebody calling trying to verify personal information. I need to get information about the buyer. Could you please send me some personal information just so we think we know we've got the right person. And mainly have a secondary verification system. And the best one is to simply pick up the phone, call the CEO, call the person who is asking for the transfer and say, did you send this message? Can you verify that you want me to send this now to a new location, or that you want me to send it by way of wire rather than mailing out a check? And if you discover a fraudulent transaction, if you discover you've been defrauded, what do? Quickly contact your bank and request a recall. Most banks have a 72-hour wait time if it's an international transaction. Often they can get the money back if it's within 24 hours. Quickly contact the FBI at your local office or at their email. They have a recovery asset team called RAT, R-A-T, Recovery Asset Team. And if you get to them quickly enough, they can facilitate undoing that transaction. So I'll quickly go on to rental scams, and I get a lot of phone calls about this. This is very active here in Santa Barbara. Some of you might be quite familiar with this. The first thing I'm going to tell you is finding a rental on Craigslist can be a really bad idea. According to the Better Business Bureau, Craigslist is regularly used by scammers. So how does this scam work? Well, the fraudster will copy a photo and a description of property that's listed for rent, and they'll post it online with their own contact information. And of course, they will post it at a much reduced price, a very attractive price. And when the potential renter calls, they will, of course, have all kinds of excuses why they can't show the property, but you're welcome to drive by it or take a virtual tour, which they conveniently have. And of course, the potential renter is very excited because it's a good property at a very good price. And the scammer will try and get you to send in first and last month's rent. So this happened here in Santa Barbara by somebody who was hit by the COVID layoffs. She got her CARES money and she was unable to find a job here in Santa Barbara. She decided to move back to the Midwest, Minneapolis, to be with her sister. And she went on Craigslist, thought she had lined up an apartment, sent the first and last month's rent, used the CARES money that she had received, found out it was a scam, there was no such apartment, and now what does she do? So, she would have been on the street, and she came to our office. We fortunately have a victim witness fund. We put on the State Street Mile, which is a race. We do it every year, and we raise money independently for victims of crime that can't otherwise get any kind of restitution. Fortunately, we were able to tap into our fund and give her the money to replace the money that she had lost to make her whole again. Now, scammers will do this with houses that are actually for sale, and this happened to a friend of mine. She and her husband had listed their house for sale. The scammers copied the photos and the information from the multiple listing, and they put it on a rental site. And interestingly enough, my friend was having an open house on her property, and it's an amazing number of people who were interested in coming to that open house. And they were informed, so they'd call up the scammer now and they'd say, where's the open house? How can I take a look at the property? And the scammer said, now what you don't want to do is contact the realtor who will be showing the property, because the buyers have decided to take the property off the market and rent it. They are not happy with their realtor. So please don't say anything, but go take a look at the property. If you're interested, give me a call. So my friend went to her own open house and saw hordes of people there who thought the property was for rent. Fortunately, they were able to shut that down. Vacation rentals are a particular target for scammers, because if you're renting a vacation rental in another state, in another city, you don't expect to be able to go by and take a look at it. You just go on faith. So they are really a juicy target for scammers. You pay your security deposit, you arrive at your destination, and lo and behold, the property may not exist, and it certainly won't be for rent. So how do you spot this scam? Well, there's some big red flags. The owner is always out of the country, can never show you that property in person, and has a good excuse for why they can't do it. They're helping out a family member whose parents have passed away. It's their property, and they're helping them try and get a renter into this house. They often pose as a very religious person, somebody that has really good moral values. They somehow weave that into the conversation. And they want you to pay the deposit by Western Union, MoneyGram, gift card, or wire transfer. Anytime you hear those words, be alarmed. Those are huge red flags. Okay, here's another real estate kind of scam that I just heard about. And I haven't heard about any of this happening here in Santa Barbara. So it's called deed theft, and it's when somebody steals your identity and then steals your property. The thieves usually target a second home, a vacation rental, a vacant house. They use the information that they can glean about you from the internet or from the dark web, where, by the way, all of our information exists. They assume your identity. They file paperwork using forged signatures, forged documents. They file paperwork with the county registrar's office to transfer ownership of the property to themselves. They then sell the property or drain out the equity. You know it's happening if you stop getting tax bills, water bills, if you stop receiving rent. How do you protect yourself? Home title lock. You can pay $15 per month, and they'll guarantee your property. You can check your property on the county recorder's website periodically to make sure nothing's happened. Check your credit reporting agency to make sure nobody's taken out credit in your name. And look for any deeds that you didn't prepare or sign or record. And I'm probably running out of time here, so I should probably stop.
Vicki, thank you, Vicki. Before we turn it over to Jim, do you have, for example, a prominent case that the district attorney's office has prosecuted recently that might be of interest to our members attending today?
Yeah, I do. And this is a case that happened here at home, so we actually could prosecute it. And I call this the case of three women. So we have a defendant, who I will call the defendant, and this defendant had a relationship with two other women, Karen and Roberta. I've made up those names. So her first relationship was with Karen, and she and Karen were in a romantic relationship. Karen wanted to show her love for the defendant and gave her an interest in her home, signed over an interest in her home. There was a deed. Later, when the defendant had run through a lot of Karen's money, gambling debts, many other things, Karen wanted to get out of the relationship. She wanted to sell the property. The defendant said no. The defendant had a half interest. So Karen ended up having to buy her out at the tune of $80,000. Now, mind you, the defendant had not paid one dime for this property. The defendant then went to Roberta, who was a 71-year-old woman who did not know that the defendant no longer owned this property. This property was gone, and in fact, Karen had already sold the property. The defendant told Roberta that she wanted to buy out Karen's interest in this property. Of course, she no longer had an interest. The property wasn't even in Karen's name again. But the defendant said to Roberta, I need $100,000 to do this. I will pay you back in 5 years, interest rate of 5%. They drew up a contract, no deed of trust, and Roberta loaned her the money. So of course the defendant made the first 3 payments and then nothing except a bunch of excuses. Roberta realized that she had been taken. She hired an attorney. She came to see us. We prosecuted the case. Turns out the defendant had a serious gambling problem. All this money went up in smoke. We filed theft by false pretenses, elder abuse, and interestingly enough, money laundering, because the defendant used money from ill-gotten gains to gamble. So we had quite a few counts of money laundering. So we secured a conviction. The defendant served some time in county jail. She's now on probation and has paid back about $33,000. So that's a fraud case close to home.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Vicki. Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask Jim Keith to join us online here. Unmute yourself, Jim. And please tell us about the Real Estate Fraud Advisory Team and the work you're doing in Ventura.
Hi, everybody. Some of you are familiar with what we have done in Ventura County. Those of you who are very active in the California Association of Realtors have probably heard me speak ad nauseum about our organization. We started in 2005. In 2005, I moved. I live in Thousand Oaks, but I started managing an office in Oxnard, and started seeing some things that I had never seen before. Very strange transactions. Properties, the first one was properties being passed back and forth between a number of people with phony appraisals, et cetera, inflated values. And bottom line is, there were, as I recall, 11 properties, basically almost brand new homes in a very nice area. And after the last transfer, nobody ever made a payment. They were all foreclosed on. Okay. We got very lucky in Ventura County. Our district attorney, Greg Totten, Vicki is probably familiar with him. Unfortunately, he just announced his retirement. He is going to be the CEO for the California District Attorneys Association, which is a nice move for him. And it was his vision. He saw things were happening in the real estate market that troubled him greatly. White collar crime, not the kind of things that the police really get involved in. They're not trained. And so he created what was, to the best of my knowledge, the first real estate fraud prosecution unit in the state of California. And this was back in 2005. We work with not only the DA's office, but the Department of Real Estate has a place on our board of directors, as does the FBI. We have a couple of civil litigators, because some of these things really belong in a civil court, not criminal. We have realtors, we have escrow, we have title, we have an appraiser. We think we have the whole thing covered. We meet monthly, where we are just constantly trying to keep our ear to the ground, figure out what's going on out there. because if it's happening in LA, it's going to happen in Ventura. If it's happening in Ventura, it's going to happen in Santa Barbara. We got on the rental scam thing, God, probably 10 years ago, at least. It's been going on for a while, and it shows no signs of slowing down. In fact, COVID has made it easier for them to succeed. Because now when you say you can't see a house, oh, I get it. Yeah, of course, COVID, I can't see the house. No problem. And like Vicki said, what they do is they will just steal your pictures for homes that are on the market. They'll put them on Craigslist. I saw something in chat. We have found it very easy to communicate with Craigslist, by the way. If we tell them something is fraudulent, it goes away. Okay. But the rental scam thing, we have, if y'all are sitting someplace, obviously you can't tell me you're in your car because I know you're not. Write this down, refat.org. I think you will love the website. If it's happened in the last 15 years and it's a bad thing, it's there. Okay. We put out press release after press release every time something happens. Because our district attorney is so active in this arena, we have there are 1.5, I'm not sure what the half means, full-time investigators who do nothing but real estate fraud investigations. There are currently in Ventura County somewhere between 20 and 25 active investigations. That's really quite a bit, okay? And not all of these are going to lead to prosecution, but when somebody files a complaint, it is investigated, okay? I would guess that I'm guessing probably at least 40% of the ones that are currently being investigated are going to wind up being prosecuted and go to trial, or as what happens usually, and I'm sure Vicki is very familiar with this, many times in these types of cases, you're going to get a plea from the defendant, okay? Because unlike a lot of other crimes, most of this stuff, there's a paper trail, okay? And the evidence is going to be overwhelming. We've had so many money laundering things. Vicki was talking about that, and it's all there. You can't hide this kind of stuff, you know. So a lot of times they end up with pleas. We have gotten millions of dollars in restitution for victims in Ventura County over the last 15 years. The one thing about the business email compromise that I would like to add, and this is straight from the FBI. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I'm guessing very few of you utilize multi-factor authorization or authentication in your emails. It creates one more step that you're going to have to do. The FBI has told our group that if all realtors did that, 99% of wire fraud in the real estate business would go away. And we're talking millions and millions of dollars that are lost every single year. And usually, I know of a couple of cases where where the victim was able to get the money back, but that's because they didn't listen to their bank. What I tell people is, you know, yes, your bank they have internal things, okay? What you want to do is immediately contact the FBI, okay? Because even if the money is destined to go offshore, they've got boots on the ground around the world. We got back $173,000 for one of my agent's clients because the bank said, don't worry, we've got it covered. And I told our agent, no, you have them go to, and you might want to write this down as well. The letter I, the letter C, the numeral 3.gov, ic3.gov. That is the FBI's That is the FBI's site for cybercrime. They are, I haven't had to contact them for a while, but I can tell you that they have, when we have had to contact them, they have been extremely responsive. And they got, because we went to the FBI, we got $173,000 back. It took about 6 months because they had to be sure that that $173,000 was this person's $173,000. I mean, there's a lot of money out there floating around. And for the most part, if you don't contact the FBI, they've said 72 hours, but within 20, if you do it within 24 hours, there's a decent chance that that money can be recovered. Okay. The other thing, the thing that we have our eyes on very carefully, intently, is there are, the last I heard, there are more than 4 million properties in the United States that are currently in forbearance. I think it was going all the way back to April. As soon as the possibility of forbearance was announced, our ears pricked up immediately, and it was, hello 2007. We're not exactly sure what we're gonna see, but there are people out there that are in trouble. And the more desperate these people become, the more likely they are to believe the smooth talking person who calls them on the phone or whatever. Desperation tends to make you believe what you want to believe. Okay, so advance fees for loan modifications, all that stuff, that's been illegal since I think I want to say 2011, maybe. Okay, we know we're going to see that again. We've already seen the starts of it. These people are, the scammers are not stupid. Okay. In fact, we don't think we've seen their A game yet. There are, with what's it called, voice recognition or whatever. There was a case of a CEO in England wired, I think it was like $250,000. His assistant or somebody in his office got a message from him. It was his voice. They could have sworn it was his voice. It wasn't his voice. They sent $250,000 to somebody in France, as I recall the details of that. So there's all kinds of things out there. And our industry, we do have a lot of advantages. We talk to so many people, okay? And they talk to other people. You know, if you believe in the concept of 6 degrees of separation, what we try to do, what REFAT tries to do, our job is to educate and to communicate, both to the public, but more importantly, even than the public, is to our membership, because we know our members are talking to the public. And if we can make realtors aware of the kinds of things that are going on in our business that is taking millions of dollars away from the public, if we can educate realtors to educate the people that they come in contact with, we can slow it down. We're not going to stop it. Fraud's never going to go away. We accept that. I've been in this business for 46 years. And there was fraud when I started. We didn't always recognize it. In the late 70s, when interest rates started climbing, they went from, it was like 7.5% forever and ever and ever. And then all of a sudden you woke up the next day and it was 18% or whatever. You know, some of you will remember that. There were fake, phony gemstone deals that people were trying to put together. This is before a lot of you were even in the business. But it's been there all along. We know it's always going to be there. We know that depending upon the type of market you're in, it's a cyclical business. that depending upon where you are in the cycle, you're going to see different kinds of scams. We don't know exactly. We know people are going to get hit, people that are in forbearance. There are going to be victims. Okay. We don't know exactly how it's going to happen. But like I said, we put the word out in April to people that were in forbearance or thinking about forbearance. We contacted SBAOR. They did the same thing. We contacted the Department of Real Estate. They put out a consumer alert so far as forbearance is concerned.
Jim, if I could just help facilitate for a moment here, we want to allow time for questions, Q&A, and then also go to our raffle. Is there anything you'd like to share by way of wrap up before we go to attendee questions, Jim?
Yeah, real quick. When I start talking, sometimes I don't know when to stop. I understand that. Our 15th annual Forum on Fraud is tomorrow. It is a virtual event. If you go to refat.org, right on the first page, the first thing you're going to see is where you can register for that. We have 2 of our senior deputy district attorneys involved with the real estate fraud prosecution unit who are going to be there. They're going to go over some of the cases with pictures. And when they show mugshots, they don't look quite the same as your picture does on your business card. That's always a very popular part of this thing. And some of you, I don't know if any of you know Jennifer Felton. She is an attorney. She has her own law firm. She represents dozens of escrow companies. She's very involved in civil fraud as well. She's going to be one of the presenters. It's at 2 o'clock tomorrow. It's about 90 minutes. I think you'll get some really good insights. But the other thing I want to say is please go to our website, take a look at the stuff that's there. We have, so far as the rental scam, really quick, we have a thing you can put in a front window of a house that says this property is not for rent. Okay. All of our stuff is both in English and in Spanish. For Santa Barbara, mostly you're going to want the English stuff, obviously. Okay. But it can be put in a front window. It has the contact information for the FBI. We have found that has helped, especially with vacant houses. Somebody drives by, they see something in the window. Oh, okay. This is really not for rent. So there's all kinds of stuff there. Feel free to use it. It's not proprietary. We want to share.
Thank you so much, Jim. And thanks to Vicki and Jim. And now let's go to our questions. Why don't we come back to Wendy's question about Craigslist, because it sounds as though, Wendy, you've had some difficulty or have heard of difficulties removing scam ads from Craigslist. Now, Jim, to either of you, Vicki or Jim, you've had some experience with this. The question was to Vicki. Do you have any comments, Vicki, as to how to handle removal of scam ads on Craigslist? And we'll let you tag team with Jim if that's necessary.
Yeah, I really don't, but I do want to say hi, Wendy. I know Wendy, and glad you're with us. So Jim seems to have some experience with that, so I'll defer to Jim.
I have not ever personally contacted Craigslist, but I know of dozens of people who have, and nobody has ever told me that there's been any kind of a problem whatsoever. They tell, they call Craigslist and say, hey, this property is on the market. It's my listing. It's for sale. It's not for lease. This is a scam, and they take it down. So I don't know I've never heard of anybody having a problem.
Okay, very good, Jim. Thank you. Raina Stapleman, would you unmute yourself? You have a question for our panelists, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, I have called Craigslist for a listing that I had on the market, and my seller called to let me know that, oh, by the way, this her condo was on Craigslist for rent. And so I did call Craigslist and I spoke with someone there, and I said, I want this taken down immediately. And they did. And I said, why, who is the person who has put this on? And he said, oh, well, I can't tell you that. And I said, well, yes, you can, because you're being paid by these people. And he said, well, I can't do it. And I said, I'm going to contact district attorney and let them know that this is going on and you're not doing anything about it. And so he was like, well, you know, he goes, I've let them know that, you know, it's been taken down and this and that. But they, you know, they're being paid for these ads. And yet there doesn't seem to be any way so far that we can, you know, hold their heels to the fire and say, hey, you're responsible partly for this because you're just putting anything on. And I've noticed the difference now with like Facebook and Twitter, and they're starting to say, you know, no, there are certain things that we will not, you know, put on or we will remove if this is going on. How can we pressure them to say this is not okay because of all of these people, you know, sadly, who are being taken nationwide, you know, by these false, you know, schemes? That's my question. I mean, there's got to be something that we can do as a, you know, even just as the realtors, to say this is not okay. You need to start to have some kind of screening.
Vicki,
Because,
any recommendations for Raina and the others?
It's a very good question. You know, they respond to economic pressure. If people stop listing, they're going to stop, they're going to perhaps be a little more careful. You can always report it to law enforcement. You can always ask them to do an investigation. If enough people do that, perhaps something might happen. No guarantees. But as an organization, can you put a little pressure on Craigslist? I don't know.
Thank you, Vicki. I'm going to keep moving here because we have Sarah Sinclair has her hand up. Sarah, if you would unmute yourself. And
I was just going to say, obviously I've never worked for Craigslist or Facebook or any of the online only areas, but I've worked in newspaper advertising for 30-ish years. We have not had any problems in the last few years at the Independent, but over the years, a lot of different types of claims have been made that ads are fraudulent. And you can imagine, Raina, if you called me up and I didn't know you, and you said, so-and-so has a false ad, blah, 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 I wouldn't be able to give out Jennifer's phone number and name if she had placed the ad. Our rule of thumb has always been we can only cooperate with attorneys. So I would always encourage people to go to the authorities so that we could, in fact, deal with them if there was something fraudulent.
yeah, this is why I called the district attorney's office. And they have this kind of call all the time. So it's not, you know, it's so prevalent, unfortunately.
Yeah.
yes, exactly. I want to ask Vicki to come back to one of the scams that our district attorney's office has been working on, and that we all, I think, as we do business email every day, the business email compromise scam. Is there anything else, either questions from our attendees regarding this? Vicki gave some examples, but any other safeguards, Vicki? Because we have such an increased volume of business email, and then working from home or remotely, as you said, we're even more vulnerable now.
Well, I have a whole list. The FBI and Department of Justice have put out many, many bulletins on this issue because it's so flagrant right now. One of the things that I mentioned was create an intrusion detection system that flags emails that look like a legitimate email. Create an email rule to flag email communications where the reply to the email is different from the from email address shown. This was one that I also read here. Instead of replying directly to, if you get an email, forward use forward when you're going to reply, and then type in the email address that you know is the correct one. So you're typing it in, you're not responding to an email that was sent to you. The thing that seems to come up always is pick up that phone and make a phone call. The old-fashioned way of confirming. Confirm requests for transfers of funds or requests that add new vendors, that change vendor payment information.
Okay, maybe what we could do, Vicki, is if there's any information that you could share with the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors,
Yeah.
We can have Casey put that out to the full membership. And Marcella has a question. What is multi-factor authentication for emails, either for you or Jim to answer that, please?
It just means another way of authenticating that this was a legitimate request. So you get an email from somebody supposedly who's the CEO of your company. It seems unusual. It's either too urgent or the wording seems strange. You're not sure. A two-factor authentication is picking up that phone again, making the call to a number that you know is the accurate number to the CEO. Hi, Jim, did you make this request?
Okay, taking that extra step,
Yeah.
Cautionary, secure step. Okay.
It
Other
also-
questions? Yes, Jim, please.
No, it also involved, so far as email is concerned, besides just your username and password, there would be a second step that you would have to take, something that only you know, okay? Something that you own, or a piece of information that is yours and yours alone, as a second step to get into it.
Similar to what most banks are now requiring, correct, Jim? I've noticed that myself, yes.
And escrow companies, yes.
And escrow companies, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions for our panelists before we close with the raffle? And again, you need to turn your webcams on if you want to participate in the raffle. I don't see, did anybody have their hands up who I missed who didn't come in through chat before we go back to Pat and Casey to do the raffle? Jean, if you have a question, thank you, Jean, go ahead.
Just had a quick comment, and I learned this from Paul Hurst when he was emceeing our economic forecast. He made the comment that I pass along to everybody. If you never learn anything, learn this, that if you just change your passwords to be a minimum of 12 characters, you will be gazillion times more secure and they won't be able to get in. So I'm starting to go through my list and I'm doing that and checking them off.
Good deal.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jean. And lastly, we just, I think, sent out to everyone from Jennifer Lemerick to be aware of any delays in emails between you and your escrow officer. That could be a sign of an email interception. Thank you, Jen, for sharing that. And now let's go to Pat Costello and Casey to handle the exciting raffle that we have. And for those who turned on their webcams, you're going to participate in this. Pat, over to you.
All right, so everybody, I know that there's a few video participants, and this is how it works. We're going to have, Casey is going to spin the raffle wheel, and we're numbering your, I'll be numbering each individual as I see them. So right now is a good time to join, and
we're spinning.
Oh, you've already got it. Wow, that's awesome, Casey. Look at that. She's spinning it right now, and it's getting close.